Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
Have you ever read Getting Things Done?
No.
As a methodology? So I'll spare you the whole long spiel, but basically he's got a flow chart that I still live by. And you look at the flow chart. Well, he's got a concept which is if it's less than 2 minutes, you do it. If it's longer than 2 minutes, then you got to decide if you're going to defer it, and you got to put in a date where you're going to do it, or you're going to delegate it so someone else must do it, or you're going to drop it, which means you're just not going to do it. So, and I kind of live by that sometimes. So if there's an article that I want to read, it'll be in my tabs, and then I'll come back and look at it, and I may just give it a quick skim over, and then that's, within 2 minutes I decide whether I'm going to keep it or not. And if I'm still going to keep it, then I might, and the drop it could be you put it into a folder, like a research folder. So if it's like a topic you look at a lot, like obviously digital workspace, we look at a lot. So I'll have a whole folder for articles of stuff. And that's how I do it. It works most of the time, not all the time. None of these things work all the time, but yeah, it's one way to filter out all the noise.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a good system to kind of, put things away so it's there. You're not going to lose it and not be able to find it again. Whether or not you go back to it, but at least it isn't crushing your CPU and your memory.
Yeah, because Chrome is renowned for that, taking up too much memory.
Teams is pretty bad too. It's mostly Chrome and Teams for me that are really system hogs.
Yep. But I've been looking at my bandwidth usage because I'm on a 4G card now, and I've only had the card in place for maybe, end of January, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I've already used about 60 gigs worth of data. So Teams is definitely a hog because I'm only using it really for work. And I spend most of my time on phone calls. So with video. So it's definitely taking a lot of resources.
Yeah, even when I haven't been using video as much, I notice the Teams still demands a lot. And I wonder if that's ever going to get optimized or if it's just going to get worse as they, obviously the strategy, right, is to make it the place where you go for, to access any of these other apps where you live as much as possible just within Teams, which means, more things need to be added in, new features, make it better to edit documents within Teams, which I could only imagine would be, make it a, heavier app.
Yeah, it's built on a platform called Electron. I don't know much about Electron, but I would suspect that because I think Electron's JavaScript based, it's going to be quite intensive because it is script that's been run. And the reason why I used Electron, I think they use Electron as they wanted something that was multi-platform. But yeah, I would think that's probably where some of the problem is. There is definitely an optimization that could happen there. It's probably something worth asking Tom about because he's on the inside track on a lot of that sort of stuff. Wow, so he's an MVP for it, so but potentially he would know. But yeah, it's definitely heavy, and you'd think that they would. You always think the logical thing is to make it perform optimally, but as long as no one's complaining, they probably aren't doing anything about it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot to weigh. I do think it's gotten a lot more stable as a platform over time as I've used it. Definitely, I remember. So we were beta users on it. And there was a time where just like every week I felt like I was using the, help function, submit a bug, submit feedback kind of mechanism. And I don't find myself doing that anymore. So
yeah, it's definitely improved. I do find it very clunky still. You talked about editing documents. So like if someone sends me a PowerPoint, it's nice that it's in the chat and you can click on it. But then that sort of loading up in the window, it's a bit odd because you can't actually see the chat anymore. So now you've got to close the window to have a chat again. Whereas what you want to do is basically the chat next to the document.
Pop out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or side by side, pop out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when we did, I used to work for a vendor called Global 360, which was bought by OpenText. When we used to do document work, you'd have a document open and you'd have the sort of steps, the checklist that you need to go through, and then the chat, whatever, it all be in one screen. So it was all nicely laid out. So you weren't wasting time. And I find that would be my concern about Teams being the go-to place. Is it's not a very efficient place to work. and I can't figure out what's wrong with it, but I find like the chats, you be in a chat, but now you're in a Teams conversation, so you have to like move away from chats to Teams to have a conversation, and it's just that's an unintuitive way of handling things. And then if you're trying to find something that's important, or someone says something that you want to drive an action from, or something like that, sometimes the ability to interact with that message is not the same. So you can't just reply in the thread to that comment. You almost have to reply where you are in the next part of the chat, and say, referring to your comment about blah blah blah, here's what I think, which is very like clunky, and actually you don't want to persist that kind of chat, because it's going to be very difficult to follow. Something that I think Slack has got a bit of a better play on.
Yes, I was gonna say there are some people who are really diehard Slack fans, and I think maybe that simplicity of experience, or just like, there's really fewer ways, I think, to use Slack, whereas Teams, there's more variables for individual behavior and how you treat the Teams versus chat model. I mean, I guess, Slack does have private messaging, but it is more similar, I think, between the messaging, the private messaging and the Slack feed than Teams is between the team and the chat, if that makes sense.
I don't think I follow you. I mean, maybe if I sort of do it this way. So if you're in a Slack channel, someone can say something, and you can reply to that statement in its own thread, and you can sort of branch out within the same conversation still, but you can have a side thread that's running. And when you reply to that statement, you can either reply in the thread, or you can reply in the thread and to the main conversation. So it looks like, and in that sense, if you reply to the main conversation, you have a new line with your response, but you also have inside the thread what your response was, which is sort of seen as bad etiquette to do both. You normally just reply inside the thread, but you can take that conversation into a direct one-to-one conversation as well from that chat. So you don't have to go and start a new conversation to have the one-to-one. You can sort of, like you do in WhatsApp, you can reply to something in a group, but you can reply privately and go into a sub channel or a sub chat without everyone else knowing what's happened.
I guess, speaking of WhatsApp, I know there was it a couple weeks ago now, the mass exodus off of WhatsApp and onto apps like Signal because of Facebook's terms of service changes. I remember you had some thoughts there.
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't left WhatsApp, although I have had Telegram for a long time, and at Signal I've always heard about, but I've never installed it. So obviously I did what most people did, is I installed Signal and started talking on there. I don't like Facebook generally. Like 99% of the time, I can't stand the business, can't stand what they're about. But it's unfortunately one of those things where I think you have to have an account. At the very minimum, you have to have it so that no one else has your account. So identity protection and stuff like that. WhatsApp is so useful for me in the sense of I'm, a whole lot of groups that I'm on, and people are, generally if I want to chat to someone, they're on WhatsApp. And even here in this, a lot of businesses are only available via WhatsApp chat. So you can phone them on WhatsApp. So like, stupid example, like our Thai massage bunch, they've got a phone number, but they respond quicker on WhatsApp. They'd answer in the phone. So I think it'd be very difficult for people to leave WhatsApp. But I don't like the Facebook approach to things generally. So I've got and turned off all the things you can turn off. There's actually a link that's going around at the moment of what you should enable and disable and all that kind of stuff. So I'll send that to you if you haven't seen it. But like Instagram, like Twitter, any social media, I think you have to have an identity there that you protect, so no one else can impersonate you. But whether you actually use these things, that's a personal preference. And I think we do need to realize that, I mean, and this is a pretty common concept, but not everyone knows this, that when it's for free, you're the product. So if you're going to use Facebook, realize that whatever you do on there, posting pictures of, like every so often I'll post a picture of something to be used against me for advertising or affecting my feed or whatever it is. So I think that awareness needs to happen. I am preferring Signal at the moment. So generally what's happening is, if someone's on Signal, I move the conversation to Signal. I find their app experience 10 times better than what's not only on the phone, but they actually have a decent iPad app. so I can use Signal on the iPad, and it's got a Windows app as well. So in that sense, it's a much better product. And I don't know if you know this, but the guys who built Signal are the same guys who built WhatsApp. They just left WhatsApp when it was bought, whatever their golden handcuffs were, and they went and built Signal more to where they wanted it to be. So, generally I've heard much more secure, much more privacy orientated than WhatsApp and Facebook, which I can agree with, but also just a simple, nice experience. Telegram, on the other hand, is a lot. That's a very dicey product. I've heard all sorts of rumors about it being known by a bunch of Russians that are going to sell to Facebook any minute now. But also that you can, if you don't protect your group, so when you create a group and you don't make it a hidden group, anyone can join your group. And there's all sorts of, you could search your area right now and find a whole bunch of groups. So you've got to be like very, very aware of when you do a Telegram group that there's all these things to consider.
Why would that be a feature?
Well, it does make sense. Like, so I was driving through Santon yesterday, and there's a on a couple signposts there's a Telegram logo, and then there's a sort of hey bud name, which I miss on Telegram, that you can go and join. Now, if you're in a local area, you want to, you need lift somewhere, like a lift club, how would you find them? Well, you used to go on Facebook or something like that and ask someone to recommend somebody. I think it's just another proliferation of that, where it's just groups that are created. But, if you set up a neighborhood watch group, you want to make sure that anyone who comes in that group actually is in your neighborhood, not the guys trying to rob you who are doing research, because that's your risk if you don't do it properly. So it's just the things you got to think about, I think.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the whole thing?
Well, I guess, WhatsApp, I've only used very in a limited sense, and I've been sort of off Facebook for a long time, but I haven't ever done the true deletion of the profile. So I find what you say about having a profile to protect your identity very interesting, and I haven't heard that as sort of an idea before, or practice that you might want to consider. Does Facebook, I thought don't they have something where they try to verify that it's really you, or is that not very robust? I know they changed that after I left the platform.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I very rarely go on. Probably once a month I'll have like a 2-hour like just binge bunch of things, whatever it is. But I've never actually checked that. I think it is device aware. So if you log in on a different device, you'll get a notification to say this device is accessing your profile. And I think you can set up the usual sort of 2-factor authentication or authorization on another device to use that device. But I've never really tried off a different device. I haven't seen that for a while.
Good to know that they have 2FA now. I need to log in and figure out what my login is and then go and do that. Because even just leaving that profile up there, and now I guess I need to think about this decision a little bit more either way. But since it's such a pain to do the full deletion, you have to at least the last time I looked into it, it was, you needed to basically contact Facebook directly and manage it that way. So I just haven't taken the full plunge.
Yeah, it's not that bad anymore. I mean, you can go into your account. I mean, you got to go find it. It's a bit tricky to get to, but you can delete your account and it gives you 30 days to change your mind. And you can also export all your data, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
I've done it a few times where I've got to that point, but then I always realize that there's so many applications that I use, like, something that you've logged in, like Strava, for example, which is a fitness app, to track everything. That's on my Facebook account. And they don't have a way to migrate your account from being a Facebook logged in account to a normal. So that's a bit irritating, so you've almost got to weigh up some of those things you've done and see if you can actually get off it completely.
Yeah, I think luckily I left the platform before that sort of proliferated. And I do think, so, for me, it really captured my Facebook activity was really my teenage years. So even if I was going to return to the platform, I think I'd rather nuke that and wipe it from the internet and restart. I don't think there's any need to, keep all of my high school classmates as my network, as interesting as I'm sure it could be to see what everyone's up to. But on the Signal front, so I've been using Signal, I think a couple years now, just always searching for a good app to Android or to message with Android users. Mm-hmm. And I think because we used to go through different Google ones. I don't even remember all the names anymore. There was like Google, I want to say it was Allo, Google. I think they had another Duo. I think they had a messaging app called Duo, but they always were changing it. And eventually we found and switched to Signal. And then it has, the added benefit of not being a major tech company and being more secure and private. So yeah, that's what I use for non-iMessage stuff. And I haven't looked back.
Yeah, I didn't actually know it was Duo. I forgot about Duo completely. But what you can do, I'm just doing it now on my Facebook account. I thought I had done it. You can set up Google as your secure thing. And I've also set up two-factor, which I've just overwritten with a new one. Just because I use the Microsoft Authenticator app and I was using the Google one. So yeah, you should do that definitely if you're not. Don't use SMS.
Yeah, I have Microsoft Authenticator, which is nice because it has the watch app, so you can just click the approve right from the watch when it works.
Yeah, that I've had some trouble with as well. Since I've switched to the Series 6, I've had trouble with that, but usually it works quite nicely. So you're saying you're using Signal and when it was before Duo. So, because I mean, if you count them, you've got Facebook Messenger, you've got WhatsApp, you've got Signal, you've got Viber or Viper, I think it is. Still got Skype that's knocking around. Then you got Teams and Zoom that are like the enterprise ones. There's probably other ones. I think there's a Cisco Teams as well.
Yeah, WebEx Teams.
WebEx Teams. It gets a bit, who do you talk to on where? They just got iMessage or SMS. Although iMessage I think is a little bit more sophisticated than just SMS. It's quite a plethora of chat applications. Then of course you got the sort of Twitter direct messaging, which you could use as well if you really wanted to.
Or LinkedIn or Instagram or I don't know if TikTok has direct message. They probably do.
Yeah, I haven't spent too much time with TikTok. I found that a very weird experience. I just can't sit there and watch weird videos all day long. Although every so often you see a pretty funny one that some guy sends them along in a group and you end up looking at a few others.
Yeah, my TikTok experience is very much seeing it secondhand on different platforms, which means, I'm sure by the time I see it, it's like passe, it's old on TikTok, it's no longer the hot new thing. It's like the memes that make it up to Facebook that have been around for a few weeks.
Yeah. We were joking about something yesterday where the memes are actually accelerating faster than the news. So none of us watched the Conor McGregor fight on Saturday night, but the memes are coming out with him being knocked out already. And we're like, oh, well, guess he lost. Don't have to watch the highlights now. Wow,
yeah, that is interesting. And that raises an interesting question about just copyright, I guess, because I would imagine that, if everyone is watching this GIF of who won the fight and they don't need to go to your website, whoever hosted the fight to watch the highlights, they probably would not be too pleased about.
Well, I don't know if you know, well, you would maybe not have noticed this with WhatsApp. So WhatsApp put in a thing, because originally, a while ago, you'd get a whole lot of videos being forwarded on WhatsApp all the time, and you'd get a video, you'd pass it on to your next group, and you'd end up with a cycle of stuff moving around. And they actually put some limits in. So you couldn't, if you forwarded a video, you could only forward it maybe to 2 other groups or one other group. So they restricted how much you could forward on it content-wise. And I wonder if that's not the start of some sort of content controls. Not so much what your content is, but the dissemination of content. And if you pick up a file by its name, and that name is something that's descriptive, you could actually get into some sort of human rights violation or opposite where you're invading privacy, really, which is what they're saying they're not doing with this change. But you just don't know. I mean, supposedly everything's encrypted, but you got to, you are putting a bit of faith in the platform.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could see, different ways where that could be protective and different ways where it could be, I don't know, I guess undesirable. It makes me think of, I think The Mandalorian, the first season when that came out, there were a bunch of Baby Yoda, GIFs and memes and whatnot. And I, if I remember correctly, they kind of cracked down on that and tried to take those off and say that people couldn't create that kind of thing and share it. So I think that changed at some point because I definitely see them now. But
yeah, I suppose that's a licensing issue, huh? Oops. I haven't seen that for a while. In fact, I finished The Mandalorian a couple of weeks ago, the end of it. And you'd think any publicity for that would be good publicity as opposed to bad publicity. You'd want stuff being sent around.
Disney is pretty, I don't know if they could really crack down on that stuff, but
yeah.
But yeah, I know I need to move on to my next call of the day.
You and me both. Cool. Well, it was good chatting. We'll chat a bit later. Cool. Cheers, Heather.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter at the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.